Beijing's One Belt, One Road initiative puts more than 130 countries in its strategic plan, in which Chinese companies were provided a large amount of capital to invest heavily overseas and enter the vital infrastructure networks of participating countries. However, these countries are facing crises or even on the verge of bankruptcy due to their inability to repay China's high-interest loans. Many people have heard of One Belt, One Road. It's a China-led economic strategy covering Europe, Asia, Australia, and South America, proposed by CCP leader Xi Jinping. In 2013, the CCP upgraded it to a national strategy. On the surface, China is trying to build up its influence by lending money to developing countries and investing in infrastructure. But what does the CCP itself think? According to the People's Forum, Beijing's official media outlet, One Belt One Road is a long-term strategic plan aimed at creating more value from China's excess productivity and labor, securing its energy and food supplies, and acquiring critical infrastructures such as ports, airports, rail constructions, as well as setting up military bases. China has been clear about what it wants to do from the start. When the One Belt, One Road initiative was first launched, the promise of generous loans and infrastructure development prompted many countries, especially those with economic difficulties, to join. As time goes by, however, many countries have fallen into a debt trap, paying an expensive price in terms of land, ports, or natural resources. The latest debt victim is Laos. The Asia Times reported earlier this month, Laos was forced to transfer control of its national power grid to Guangzhou-based China Southern Power Grid Corporation. It's worth noting that most of the power generated by Laos's Mekong hydropower projects, which is also heavily indebted to and owned by China, is exported to China, Thailand, and Vietnam, which means China will further increase its economic influence and control over those three countries. In Laos, China has planned to build a high-speed rail link to Yunnan province in China, but there is little demand for high-speed rail among Laos people, as more than half the population is living scattered throughout the country. Beijing officials said that the project is the first step in building a rail network linking China with other Southeast Asian countries. This section is part of the 885-kilometer Kunming-Singapore Railway project, running through Laos, Thailand, and Malaysia to Singapore. Including Laos, these countries are investing a considerable amount of money compared to their economies to complete China's project, with little benefit to themselves. Why would these countries agree to a seemingly unreasonable arrangement? Lenient loan terms and hidden interests in official dealings with China are big reasons why. On September 17th, the Maldives paid off a $127.5 million loan under pressure from China's Import-Export Bank, but the country still owes China $2.4 billion in debt, equivalent to more than 45% of its GDP. The government of former Maldivian President Abdullah Yameen has guaranteed that debt and allowed Chinese state-owned companies capital and labor to build resorts, airports, and infrastructure in the country without hindrance. Yameen himself got a lot of good from Beijing, where he was convicted of money laundering and sentenced to prison in 2019 by the court. In the Asia-Pacific region, there are many more such examples. Former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak stepped down in 2018, and his successor, Mahathir Mohamad, suspended and investigated the country's One Belt, One Road projects, including the nearly $16 billion East Coast Rail link. Najib was also caught up in the 1 million DB scandal, which also involved Chinese businessmen. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison on July 28th, this year. The Sasan-2 Dam, the largest dam built by China in Cambodia, has been the subject of years of protests over the lack of consultation before the villagers were evicted, illegal reclamation, poor working conditions, and the resulting deterioration of water quality downstream. Not only did the local residents lose their source of income, but the environment was also greatly damaged. In early August, the Nikkei News reported that, by the end of 2018, Beijing had doubled its loan to 68 developing countries in just 4 years, equivalent to the amount of the World Bank's total lending to these countries. The Chinese Communist Party increased its international influence in this process, and the lending countries were dominated by Chinese policies and contracts. For now, at least 40 countries have debts to China that exceeds their GDP. China's ambitions to expand its military influence are also behind the One Belt, One Road initiative. A September 10th report by the Asia Society Policy Institute, an American think tank, found that China is building multi-purpose ports in what it regards as strategic choke points in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Burma, and Cambodia. In exchange for loans or infrastructure contracts, China asked those countries to lease their ports for 99 years and require the countries not to interfere with port operations. The report found that the ports were designed for mixed commercial and military logistical use, rather than solely for commercial use. In 2017, Sri Lanka defaulted on its debt and leased Hambantota, a deepwater port with critical military and commercial value, to China for 99 years, promising not to comment on the port's operations. The Republic of Djibouti, a strategic location in the Gulf of Aden in northeastern Africa, whose debt to China exceeds 39% of the country's GDP, allowed China to build a military base there in 2017. The base is just 13 kilometers from the U.S. Army's Camp Lemonnier. Since 2008, China sent more than 30 convoys to the Indian Ocean via the South China Sea and the Malacca Strait, accompanied by submarines, for anti-piracy reasons. The Malacca Strait was seen by Beijing as a vital passage to the Persian Gulf, which has abundant oil resources. One Belt, One Road has also helped China expand its influence in international organizations. China has successfully blocked calls by the United Nations and other member states for an independent investigation into the Xinjiang issue. In June this year, the United Kingdom, representing 27 countries, spoke against Beijing's application of national security laws to Hong Kong.
We wish to raise our deep concerns at the imposition of national security legislation on Hong Kong, which undermines one country, two systems, and has clear implications for human rights.
While Cuba, representing 53 countries, spoke in Beijing's favor, supporting the Hong Kong national security laws.
We welcome the adoption of the law of the People's Republic of China on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region.
According to Human Rights Watch's report 2020, China's maneuvers have strengthened the authoritarian regimes of targeted countries, making them even more oblivious to human rights, the rule of law, and other international standards. For example, during a visit to Beijing, Prime Minister Imran Khan, one of the key players in the One Belt, One Road initiative in Pakistan, said nothing to his fellow Muslims who were persecuted in Xinjiang and praised China's efforts to care for its Muslim citizens. For now, many countries are aware of the crisis and are phasing out or scaling back their cooperation with China. In April this year, Tanzanian President John Magufuli cancelled a $10 billion Chinese loan signed by the former president, saying that China wants to take control of the local port and airport in exchange for infrastructure, stating, "Only a drunk would accept such a clause." In democratic countries, the law is another way of solving problems. Victoria is the only Australian state to have signed the One Belt, One Road agreement with Beijing, and its premier, Daniel Andrews, was recently called to a Senate hearing to explain why he is a strong supporter of the agreement.
Of the land while you're in charge. Now, how much of Australia have you sold off to China?
Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has repeatedly criticised the incident, while the Australian Parliament is also pushing the Foreign Relations Bill, which would use the Constitution to restrict all levels of government departments, universities, and other institutes' power on foreign affairs. China's actions are creating an even greater economic crisis for the rest of the world. According to a report by the Kiel Institute for the World Economy in Germany, China's lending to other countries soared tenfold from 2000 to 2017, from less than 500 billion to more than 5 trillion USD, and about half of that was hidden debt. Beijing has delegated much of its debt to Chinese-led joint ventures, including many Chinese state-owned enterprises, and lending countries are often not fully aware of the numbers and details of their loans to China. This year, COVID-19 first broke out in China and spread to the whole world, causing more than 900,000 deaths and setting back the global economy. In Africa, at least 100 billion in capital fled the emerging markets, offsetting years of effort and cutting off the future of the poor countries. These countries have not received the infrastructure promised by China, but are already in a debt crisis that will cost them more than they bargained for.